Okay, Rich. So some big shakeups in the Google universe this past week. First up, this probably made the most news. We got Jeff, Dean, and then three of his colleagues, Sanjay, Oriel, and Kwok, started a new organization called Discovery Loop. And the mandate or mission of this company is still a little fuzzy, but they're trying to use auto research agents to improve the process of building new AI models. And then from there, they're trying to use the same kind of techniques to do more deep scientific research.
Yep.
Like the
Yep.
discovery of new materials, protein folding. All that stuff seems very reminiscent of DeepMind, which also went through a very large reorganization this week, where its old CEO, Demis Hassabis, is giving up day-to-day control of DeepMind and instead switching over to this like chief scientist role in the Alphabet parent company. So they're folding the old DeepMind, the same people, into this new organization that's going to be run by the DeepMind CTO, who's now just going to oversee all of Gemini.
Can we show this funny post? It's actually a little sad. So Zach Lipton, who is a big thinker in AI space, he said, amazing moment in our Orwellian corporate state that nobody can tell whether Demis Hassabis stepped up or stepped down. And then Jan LeCun, who, as you recall, was actually the director of FAIR, he writes, he stepped aside, as I did in 2018 when I moved from director of FAIR to chief AI scientist and then eventually moved away, right?
Harbinger of things to come.
Look, man, it seems like something's up at Google. I don't know what it is. I don't know like why it feels like there's this big shakeup, even though publicly, we haven't really been aware of anything happening at the level of like interpersonal relationships at Google. But it feels like Google has lost a lot of its key thinkers this last week, and time will tell like what this means for Gemini, what this means for different Google models.
And this is really what I want to talk about, because I feel like you've been saying for a while now that Google is behind, which I think is kind of contrary to the narrative of some people online, that Google is actually the sleeper horse in this race. Like they're doing shockingly well for how little they're discussed with the big labs. What is behind your assessment that Gemini is so far behind? And do you think that this reorg is going to help them catch up or going to result in them being left further behind?
I mean, this is all a little gossipy, right? But like if you look at...
But this is a gossip show.
I guess so, man. I mean, look at 3.1 Pro, right? No one's really talking about this flagship model. And the reason why is because, frankly, there's just a lot of bugs in the model. Like it doesn't do very well. There've been some reports that actually Google is leaking a lot of its thinking traces. This is something we haven't seen. Like it's a blunder at the level of like something that maybe would have seen 3-4 years ago. It doesn't really make sense that Google is making these mistakes given its research expertise. And yet these models just aren't doing well. They're not performing the way they used to. And we're seeing all these reorgs. It feels very akin to the shakeup that Meta had when Jan LeCun was effectively pushed aside in lieu of, our homeboy Alex Wang, right? So I would love to bring someone on from Google to explain to us like what the hell is going on here. But it seems like something happened where the Gemini team got largely disbanded and like reorged in some crazy way. And I don't think it's too surprising to see, like old timers like Jeff, Dean, and Kwok leave to form their own thing. I think that there's a little bit less of a fire that Google has. I think there's a little bit less of this like collective sense that we're, working towards increasing the world's availability of knowledge. And now it feels more like it's a really big org that has grown just a little bit past its ability to manage its people,
Well, I mean, they have how many hundreds of thousands of people working for Google worldwide? I mean, it's like such a remote company is one problem. They've got offices everywhere. I feel like they're trying to collaborate across time zones, which just slows things down a lot. I got a lot of thoughts on this. I guess in the Gemini case specifically, the Gemini team has been composed of so many different research groups over time. Like, remember when Google Brain and Google AI were two separate things?
Yep.
And those were merged and combined into something that also works on Gemini. You now have DeepMind. It's clear that like the Google bet from the top down is Gemini's the future. We're going to leave this all out on the field. This is our way to stand up to the big guys. Screw the other research. Yes, we have these subsidiary spinoffs like the Isometric Labs, which is doing like the protein folding stuff from DeepMind.
All the chemistry stuff.
Yeah, all the chemistry stuff. But for the most part, it's like DeepMind, you guys were scientists. You didn't really do the language model thing. We're going to repurpose the best talent that we have onto Gemini. We're really trying to make this play. I think the challenge, honestly, in creating this new organization, in part, is that the mandate is both the research as well as the development. I know that those things are like paired often in the like acronym R&D. They're meaningfully different things. Like when I led an R&D group at Globality, we had PhD people who were like working on doing new architectures. We also had engineers that were rolling that out. Two very different processes for the two different teams. Like I had two different stand-ups every week with the different departments and only a little bit of like cross-departmental overlap. Because when you're trying to do capacity planning or like milestoning, you can do that for engineering. You can't really do that for research. Like the things that are most motivational to researchers are like paper deadlines.
Right.
And even if you have some top-down OKR mandate, it's like really hard to convince research scientists to believe in that more than they believe in their like own way of thinking and doing things over time.
And dude, it's so much worse than what you're describing, because actually now there's like maybe 6 different steps in building models. And these steps, it's like you're cooking a recipe, like they follow each other, right? Like there's the pre-training step, then there's the mid-training step, then oftentimes there's like additional like supervised fine-tuning on tasks, then there's like the RL environments, then there's like additional post-training at the very, very end. These things all have to work together in some ways, but teams are usually split across these different stages and don't talk to each other, right? And that makes it really hard to like jointly cook up something together if you're not really communicating effectively across teams. Like, I would say, hey, Pierce, you have to promise me that you're going to pass me this checkpoint that I need to then do RL on top of this checkpoint. But then you might give me not the best checkpoint for my RL. This is a very common problem, right? And so it ends up being
not by any malicious intent, by the way.
No,
it's
everyone's just like
timelines
everyone is trying to do their best within their like remit, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is that oftentimes what's best for you and what's best for me diverges, and it's hard to communicate and figure that out without having a lot of cross-team collaboration and communication. And if you're working with 10,000 people on this jointly, there's just no way you can do like the best research or the best engineering, right? And I think that frankly, like setting up right now a good language model training paradigm requires a lot of human engineering, right? Figuring out, okay, who are the top stakeholders? How do we get these folks to align? How do we get cross-team collaboration? All this stuff that feels sort of like very fuzzy and like BS management science is actually kind of really important for this, And I think that at an org like Google, where there's so many shakeups and so many different like reorganizations, it can be really hard to do good research if you're not super aligned on what the priorities are.
Yeah, and I think it's also a challenge that is separate from the other R&D labs, because there's an argument, right, of like, well, why can't Google just do what OpenAI did, which is you do this research and then you productionalize this model and then you scale it up and it's really good, which is basically how they did it, right? Like,
yeah.
OpenAI and Anthropic fundamentally had their biggest advancements when they were still closed labs and they were not actually selling a product.
Right.
And then we've pretty much just been scaling that same approaches, baking in more RL environments, changing some of the algorithms for sure. But like the general pipeline of all of that is based on the foundational research that they did back when it was still GPT unreleased. Right. And like all that has cascaded has followed.
Yep.
Gemini is trying to like walk and chew gum at the same time. They're like, we need Gemini in every single product line that we have. We need to like both build that out. But we also do kind of need to invest in this R&D to like get our pipelines good enough to be able to then run faster at solving these problems. And I think that it feels a little like they're doing too much.
Well, you know what my understanding of Anthropic and OpenAI is? It's kind of like, how Apple is run by the designers. Like there's like a secret design team that sort of actually like orchestrates everything right behind the scenes. Like they're the real brain, and it's like 15 people that decide like what gets created and how it looks and how it feels. My understanding is that at OpenAI and Anthropic, there's kind of like this like Politburo of like 10 chief scientists that have their hands in everything, right? And they kind of like manage everything. And so it's a very like, there's a lot of like politicking, right? Where you have to figure out, okay, well, like this guy wants this, but this guy wants this. And so I need to talk to this guy to actually get it done, right? That has a lot of negative effects, but the positive effect that is that, there's a group of people that understand the full pipeline really well end to end, right? And my understanding is that Gemini doesn't quite have this to the same extent. Like there's no like core 5 people that manage everything, right? Yeah. It's very decentralized. And that could be good for some products, but it just so happens that for building a language model, it is really helpful to have sort of like these cults of personality around certain scientists that decide how the whole thing should be built and set up.
Yeah, it's like why people say now that research taste is the only thing that you really have left. Like your opinions and your strong hypotheses, more than the work that you do to implement it, is what distinguishes really great researchers from subpar ones.
Right.
I think Gemini is a misunderstood model. Like I use
You think it's misunderstood?
Well, kind of. Yeah. Like I use it for some very like small discrete things, especially around video processing. It's still the best model that I've been able to find to do video analysis. So it's like got that very like good multimodal model. Problem is, people don't really care about multimodal
Sure.
models right now. They really want like the best cracked coder and
Yep.
cyber defender that you can lay your hands on, and that is not Google. They're also starting this like new pre-training run, but unclear how well that's going to end up. There's just like a lot of moving parts, I think, within the Gemini organization. And honestly, I'm worried, man. I think this is a harbinger of some pretty bad personnel changes to come. I hope I'm wrong because I actually do think it's good to have like more entrance in this space because it drives costs down, makes more innovation. Google
Yep.
has very deep pockets,
Yep.
but like the fact that Jeff Dean left, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about Discovery Loop here
Sure.
because the pitch of Discovery Loop is like, hey, we're getting investments from Google. We're going to still lease GPU capacity from Google Cloud. Like, it's not quite a subsidiary of Google in that it's not an Alphabet
Well, and
company.
like Google invested in them as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
So
Google Ventures is like one of their big angel
Yes.
investors.
yes. So it's like still very tight Google ties.
Yeah.
And like Google will reap
Yeah.
a lot of the dividends if they end up being phenomenally successful with Discovery Loop. But the fact that like these four signature people who are these like icons of Google culture for the last 20 years are
Yep.
leaving. I was talking to some pretty senior people that I know at Google, and they were saying that a lot of the reasons why they had stuck around and that their friends had stuck around was because of Jeff.
Mhm.
It was like they felt like they actually had FaceTime with someone who is a grandfather of like modern computer science. It's certainly a grandfather of modern distributed systems processing, and that's the skill set that built Google. Like Jeff kind of encapsulated this engineering first culture, and the fact that he's leaving, a lot of people are like, well, in that case, just why should I stay?
Well, and like Jeff could have retired like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Like the dude is doing well. I'm not worried about him at all. You know
Nor
what I
am
mean?
I. He's like an L11 or something.
Yeah, like he has
It's nuts.
he doesn't need to work, and like his great grandchildren will never have to work, right? But he just loves, from my understanding, like really giving. He has like this vision in his head of like Google as this like paragon of bringing the world's knowledge to everyone, right? Like that's like the original purpose of Google is like you have the world's encyclopedia at your hand, right? You can just search anything and it's like just there. And like bringing information and knowledge into the world is something that I think as new company, like that is their sole purpose, right? That's like their reason, their raison d'etre, right? Is to lead to new scientific discoveries, right? And so if we look at their website, actually it's a pretty bad vibe coded website, but
That's not true.
it's an awful website. But their whole goal is basically like, hey, we're going to use the ability of the agents to like self-reason, do research, perform long-running research tasks to solve some really hard questions in physics, in chemistry, in all of the STEM fields, basically, right? And whether or not it succeeds, like I don't know, I'm sort of 50-50 on it, right? I think deep sort of like agentic research right now is in its nascence. Like I think it's worked for some things. We haven't seen any like massive crazy breakthroughs aside from some of like the math proofs we've talked about, right? But it might be worth like revisiting this in like 6 months. I don't know if you saw the that Stanford lab Evo, that model
Mhm.
created the first like virus that they synthesized using this model. Anyway, it's all like very new research, and I think Jeff Dean's company is headed in that direction.
Yeah. So do I. So I wish them luck.
I wish them luck too, man. Yeah.
May you guys find a better auto research loop. Maybe we all use it. And we'll see how Google changes in the aftermath of this. But I think like you mentioned, or like the thread mentioned, I don't think that Demise is going to be at Google much longer.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd
No,
say maybe
exactly.
like a year, maybe like year and a half max. And then maybe he'll go off and join Discovery Loop.
Maybe, who knows?